The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Googlization Nation, where we talk each week about how to prevent the shift from hitting your plans. Unfortunately, we seem to be living in a world where uncertainty seems to be the only certainty in our lives, and volatility is the norm. A crisis can hit us personally or disrupt our businesses almost any time when we least expect it, and there seems to be more than enough of that going on. Unless you've been living under a rock these past week or a few days, we've experienced the confusion and spread of the coronavirus. We're going to be talking a lot about that today. We've had some huge wild swings in the stock market, devastating tornado in Tennessee. We're wishing everyone the best out there. Certainly those night tornadoes are devastating and totally not unanticipated, but tough to predict as well. We've had a political roller coaster. We've got a guest on from one of the states that was in the news yesterday, but we got a big political roller coaster going on with the Democratic primaries. We expect that's going to continue on, and it's only Wednesday, people. So that's, who knows? We still got another half a week to go. And I'm not sure if this is irony or coincidence, but we're glad it's happening. But our guest today was originally scheduled to talk about reputation management and employee brand and recruitment, how that all relates. And you've heard Keith and me and lots of guests, and including last week, we were talking with Kevin Grossman and Jerry Crispin, about how things were, the importance of employment brand on hiring and be able to attract talent. But as we have it, the stakes went up a notch this week with the coronavirus, and it's not only affecting us personally, but it's starting to affect when, where, and how we work. And ultimately, it may affect some company brands pretty seriously. So really fortunate, however this was happening, irony or coincidence, that Bill Coletti is going to join us. He's a crisis management and reputation management expert. We contacted a few months ago. He had a new book out, Critical Moments, and I thought it was fascinating. So we got him scheduled, and we'll be really glad that he's going to join us in just a few minutes, because he's going to help us understand the difference between a crisis and that critical moment when the shift hits your plan. So, Keith, let's talk about some things that hopefully are not crisis in your life. What's going on?
Oh, well, Ira, I mean, it's just a fascinating reality anymore to think about how many different things are going on that are big news, right? What's going on is that a whole bunch of meetings wind up getting pushed, and businesses are absolutely experiencing what it's like going through one of these crises. I think I'm seeing, every time I look up at my computer, I'm seeing another major organization telling all of their employees to work from home until further notice, which is kind of interesting, because I wonder what the output or the outcome of this is going to be. Are companies that would otherwise not ask their employees to work from home, are they going to start committing?
They've been resistant to telecommuting. Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting that two of the stocks that have skyrocketed over the last couple of weeks has been Teladoc, the kind of telephone your doc, and the other one's Zoom. How many people use Zoom, and that's sort of kind of took a huge bump up when everything was going down because of that. So pretty amazing.
Yeah. What about yourself?
The usual.
HR pressing news?
I've sort of been fascinated in just trying to follow, it fits in, not that I I got a healthcare background, so I'm always interested in what's going on in healthcare. But, it's really interesting with this coronavirus because I think I got to pull out the article. I forget. It's no longer online, but it was 2009 or 2010, whenever the H1N1 was out. About 10 years ago. Yep. And I was writing for Business to Business magazine at the time. And he said, hey, can you write a story? Can you write the lead story about how this is going to impact businesses? So a lot of the things that I'm hearing about today are similar. We didn't learn a whole lot because I remember the same darn challenge that we had back then was, there's not going to be enough respirators or ventilators, not respirators, but ventilators. Right. And what do we do to prevent it? And now that was during, right after the recession or during the recession. And, so a lot of companies, there weren't a lot of people working, people were at home. There were a lot of things going on that didn't necessarily take the headlines. But, I think we got, everybody got comfortable again and kind of went back. It was like, well, we got through that one and that wasn't, a major event. And hopefully coronavirus is going to be that way. But, as we talk about, the shift's going to hit our plan and everything's just more uncertain. So I'm anxious to talk to Bill about, what companies can do, because there were some companies that were really damaged, brands were really damaged 10 years ago after that, from not because they did anything wrong, because it worked out, but because of the way they handled it, the way they communicated the message. So,
now we get to find out if anyone's learned from that experience.
Yeah, that's huge. Hey, just for everybody, we are live today. And if you've got something, a question, a comment, you can leave a comment up on the chat, w4cy.com. Some of you may be listening that way. We also get the lines open, so you can call us at 561-623-9429. That's 561-623-9429, or you can just send Keith or me a message. We'll try to check LinkedIn while we're on the air. If not, we'll get back to you, or I'm sure Bill will be able to. Be glad to kind of connect with you afterwards and give some advice. A few quick announcements, because I do want to get to Bill. Remember, Googlization Nation. Just go to googlizationnation.com. That's our community, sending out updates, notifications of all the current shows, past shows. Yesterday had another great live stream with Ryan Kohler from Applicant Pro. We were talking about, basically the critical metrics, 6 easy metrics, recruitment metrics that every company should be using, and yet less than 50% even track the information. It's all being collected. They just completely ignore it. So we had a really, really good conversation yesterday. I've got a couple live streams coming up next week. We've had some wonderful guests last month. And we got people like Bill Coletti on podcasts that you don't want to miss. So we want to get there. My free book's still available at join.googlizationnation.com. That's join.googlizationnation.com. And you can get a free copy of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. You get a digital copy right away, and you get the paper back in about 7 to 10 business days. And don't forget, you can catch all the replays if you can't listen to the whole show today, or you miss it, or you miss some of the other ones. Great topics. You can go to any of your favorite podcast platforms. Geeks Geezers Googlization is the name. Or you can go to geeksgeezersgooglization.com, and everything's archived there.
And there's one thing, too. One thing else, Ira. There's on my website, keithcompagna.com, I'm starting to put a lot more of the podcast and a lot of the articles that we write after, just giving a little bit more behind the scenes kind of experience and perspective. I know you've got them too, but for those of you looking to get a little bit further down the rabbit hole, you're more than welcome to check that out at keithcompagna.com.
Yeah, it's not a transcript. Not done the transcripts yet, but Keith's doing a good job of doing some write-ups and some of the things we miss. Yeah, it's tough. It's hard to keep up. We got a lot of good content, and we're busy with the rest of our lives as well.
Yeah, got it.
So here's a basic question, and I thought this was a pretty simple explanation. Because we're talking about crisis management, and I'm not sure anybody cares about managing a crisis other than what's it going to do to our business, what's it going to do to our reputation. So right in the beginning of Bill's book, which is called Critical Moments, by the way. He quotes Seth Godin, and then a lot of people are really familiar with Seth. He's got great quotes. And reputation means simply what people expect us to do next. And, initially when I read that and I saw it, I go, boy, this would be great talking about employment management or employment brand. Keith, you know, how much time do we spend on that? And, people just don't apply to companies because of the reputation, because they just don't expect them to call them back. They expect to be ghosted. They expect that the application is going to be too long. Those are all simple things compared to one of the things we're going to dive in today is coronavirus. So, Bill, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization.
Ira and Craig, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to a conversation. That was a wonderful lead-in, so I'm looking forward to a great talk.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's Keith, by the way. So
Keith, excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
Minor crisis, right? So let's start out with this. As I said, I thought I found two things that were really interesting. I love that the simple definition of that you gave for reputation, and I think what I really like is, well, we'll get into this in a bit, is you talk about next reputation or next, but you also, give a very, what I want to say, kind of a concise view of a differentiation is the word I was looking for. Sorry about that. Differentiation between a crisis and a critical moment. And one of the things I hear from a lot of people, especially, I won't name them, basically if you're on the other side of this, is that there's a lot of media hype. This is overblown. We've been through this before. This will blow over. We'll find a way out. And that's, to me, that sort of fits in your crisis definition versus a critical moment, which is sort of that tip, going back to Seth Godin or Malcolm Gladwell. It's a tipping point, So kind of talk about the difference between a crisis and a critical moment, because I think that's important for everybody to understand. And then let's lead into where we are today and what companies can do about it. So,
yeah, it's a really important distinction, and so you framed it up really nicely. So, a crisis, and there's actually a third category that's not there, just a difficult, normal business issue. And so there are just things that companies have to solve that are a little bit unexpected. Everybody calls them a crisis, but they're not really a crisis. They're just a business challenge. And anybody that runs a business realizes there are just things that happen. Plans change and you need to react and respond. And so that's a whole nother category. The notion of what I talk about in this context of crisis are kind of these external events that get a whole lot of media attention, and then we very quickly move on. The easiest manifestation of that, is that if a food manufacturing company has a recall, that needs to just be managed as quickly as a crisis. That moves into a critical moment if it becomes endemic and it happens over time, and that shapes your reputation. I fundamentally believe that the American public is very forgiving. And so if an industrial facility, a chemical plant, an oil refinery has an explosion or has this sort of this crisis event that's there, people just want to know we're on top of it, we're fixing it, we're taking care of our employees, and people want you to get back to business. The coronavirus, endemic food recall issues, continued labor unrest, Walmart, for example, that starts becoming critical moments. And those are the things that over the long arc begin to shape people's reputation. I don't think a crisis, a moment in time, a singular event has a significant impact on reputation, because as you said, the Godin definition that's talked about, it's that people would expect us to do next. And he goes on further to say that next is shaped over time. And then there's a longer, more academic definition of reputation, and that comes from critical moments, is that the continuum of time is critically important. So if I were to ask you guys, tell me about the reputation of Starbucks or tell me about the reputation of Walmart, generally favorable towards Starbucks, generally negative towards Walmart. And so That took a long time. It wasn't one particular crisis. So I like to put a wall around crisis. Let's manage them, meet the media's expectations, meet the public's expectations. But then these critical moments, that's a little bit more of a sophisticated mindset to think about how are we going to solve these things long term. And Corona, we happen to be living in a perfect window into how companies are managing critical moments.
So would it be fair to say that, most events are crises, but if they're mishandled, they become critical moments?
Wonderful bridge, wonderful transition, between the two. I don't like the definition that multiple crises equal a critical moment. I don't think it's quite that simple. But absolutely, I think that if they are handled poorly, they become a critical moment, which significantly impacts your reputation. There are some tried and true tactics that we advise our clients on, and a lot of other practitioners, on how to manage a crisis. It embeds in some really important frameworks that we talk about, that we coach our clients on. But screwing it up creates a lot of problems, and then we're into critical moment zone.
So since most companies, and again, maybe I'm biased because maybe it's the companies that I surround myself with, but it doesn't seem most companies do a lot of advanced crisis planning, especially small, medium-sized businesses. They got a million things to handle. And so what are some of the, where do you start? I mean, and again, we're sort of in the throes of this. And as we talked about earlier, as Keith suggested, I have a lot of companies that are having people work from home. They change their habit. They're canceling travel, which means there's going to be more, communication, done digitally. So there's a lot of things that are going to change. What can a company do to help, prevent it from becoming a critical moment and permanently injuring their reputation?
Yeah, so we've got three thoughts on that, and I'll share them with you. Three different things, and what we, in working with our companies and companies that we think are kind of best in class in the way they address it. So there's three specific things. First and foremost is crisis simulations. We think that organizations should gather operations, legal, management, communications, sort of whoever the key stakeholders are, and they should actually simulate a crisis. It can be done in real time, kind of a live fire drill, or it can just be a tabletop exercise, just to sort of walk through. If this were to happen, how would we manage it? And all of the complexities of managing an organization for every department to get engaged. So you gotta, if you're gonna be forced into this situation, you need to practice it. It's almost like just about anything in life, whether it's a tennis serve or a public speech, you got to practice. And crisis is a skill set just like that.
Let me ask you this curious question, because I pay very little attention to crisis management. Where would you say most organizations that are, I guess I want to say I'm thinking mostly about global companies, because it seems like the obvious statement is that this impacts global companies more so than somebody sitting at the end of on Main Street here in some town in America. But that's not necessarily 100% of the case. But where would you say most companies are in terms of being capable of something like this?
Capable to respond or capable to prepare? It's two different questions.
Well, I guess in my thought, it's how prepared are they to respond?
Yeah. I think it's it's the Pareto principle. It's 80-20 or 1%. I mean, it's a small number that I think, because I think retail, healthcare, travel and tourism, those industries have to deal with this stuff a lot. So they're pretty well prepared for this. I'm still amazed that aviation screws up as often as they do. But I think that hospitality, healthcare, and retail are really pretty good at it. I think the financial industry, not as good, but also pretty good. I think the credit card companies and the banks have all had to deal with data breach and that barbarian at their gate. So I think they're relatively good at it. I think most industrial companies are really quite bad at it. I think they because the gears of the machine, whatever that machine does, whether it's a chemical cracker or punching out stainless steel, they typically work. But when they don't work and they break, people get hurt. I mean, that's a big deal. So I don't think they're really good at that. when they think about it from a reputation context. They're really good at it when they think about it from a risk management and business continuity context. They're really good at fixing the machine so it keeps working. But when it spills over into reputation. So those are some industries I think get it right. I think industrials get it wrong. I think the whole services industry, soft skills, knowledge workers, consultancies, we all have data. We all have our clients' data. And so I do think there's a risk in that space where people say, that could never happen to me.
So let's go back. I mean, I know you said there were three points that you need to cover. So the first was who should be involved. So I do have a question because I know we have a lot of consultants that listen to us. We've got a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. They may not have a team. I'm going to assume that they may have a plan that's on the shelf. They might have a consultant like you come in half day, full day, kind of rehearse some things, but that could have been months or years ago. And they might not have, planned for an event like this, a coronavirus. I mean, this is stuff made of movies, becoming real. Where should they go? Where should they start? Yeah. I mean, because, crafting it, a message internally may or may not be the best thing.
Yeah. So first step, do these simulations. But for smaller organizations, that's not appropriate. The second, and what I think is exactly the answer to this question, is that leadership teams, proactive leaders, when they have their weekly, monthly, quarterly, whenever they have their leadership team meeting, is to pull out the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times and say, what if this had happened to us? How would we respond? Because it is almost my guarantee that on any given day, you can find somebody, something like your organization in the Wall Street Journal that's going through some semblance of a crisis or critical moment. So I think that second thing, and what every leader should do, could be daily, weekly, monthly, annually, whatever the case may be, the leader should ask, what if this had happened to us? And spend the 10, 15 minutes as a leadership team to talk about that.
So everybody oh, sorry.
Go right ahead. And everybody to say their piece, and it'll be very, very obvious to the leader as well as the organization. Wow, we've never thought of that. I have no idea what we would do if that happened to us.
So everybody right now is scrambling. I mean, everybody, because, and we were talking a little bit about this before we went on the air, is that we don't know when this is going to end with the coronavirus. Yep. And it's a great example, and hopefully it will, spring's going to come, as the president suggests, and it's going to dissipate for a while. But we don't know if it won't come back greater. And if this one goes away, there'll be some other event that's going to happen. But we've got this. I mean, this is pressing. People are very fearful because every day there's a new case. Looks like Pennsylvania just got their first case. It was announced this morning. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. What's the plan? I mean, so we're in the heat of it. I mean, we can't put this on the agenda for 3 months from now to have a strategic meeting about it. What should companies be doing right now to get a message out, especially to their employees who are a little bit worried about coming in and associating with other people?
The truth is the best place to start. So a lot of companies have already jumped on the bandwagon. Keith mentioned we're canceling conferences and canceling travel. So a lot of companies are already doing that. But if you're today and you've not done anything, the first thing I would do is say to my team in an HR context, I would say, we're watching this very closely. We don't believe this has direct impact on us, but we will let you know immediately if that changes. So just simply the truth, where are we in this process and the impact that it's there? Acknowledgement that you're on top of it or that you're aware of it. I don't think every organization doesn't need to overreact to this, and every organization doesn't have to have a reaction. But I do think teams need to be told what's going on and that we're not clueless, that we at least have some semblance of thought around this. I also think it's an amazing way, done correctly, to reinforce mission and values. What do we stand for as a company? We stand for transparency, and we're going to share. We stand for, keeping, driving everybody to our KPIs, and that can pull through. So whatever those mission and values are, but you got to say something. This is too big to not say anything. I don't think what you say has to be linked to a decision. It doesn't have to be linked to no more travel, no more international travel, all conferences are canceled. Just that we're on it, we're aware, we're watching it, and reassure people. I think that's what organizations need to do today if they haven't already done something over the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, there's a lot of other questions that I've gotten, and
I've got so many questions too.
Yeah, so but we're going to take a real quick break here. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. You are listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We've got a fascinating guest today, Bill Coletti, author of Critical Moments and the founder of the Kith Company, Kith. We will be right back, and we will continue our conversation about how to manage a crisis, prevent it from going into a critical moment, and we'll be focusing a lot on the coronavirus. So stay tuned. We'll be back very shortly.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. It's XOR.ai.
Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolf, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter.
I'm fine.
Hey, welcome back to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, everyone. I'm Ira Wolf, your host, with Keith Campagna, and we've got Bill Coletti today, crisis management, reputation management expert, consultant. His company is Kith, Kith, and his book is Critical Moments. And we've been talking about how to avoid having a crisis turn into a critical moment, which may permanently damage your reputation. So in the first half, we were talking a little bit about, what a reputation is, and it's clearly what other people expect you to do during a crisis, during a moment. And we've got that upon our hands. We've got that confronting us, coronavirus. A lot of people are fearful, companies, management, people on the street, customers, employees. And we were talking about things that we can do. And when we left off, and including during the break, Keith, you had a question. So I'll let you set it up, and then we can continue that conversation.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah. So personally, I'm one of those guys who thinks that everything is being blown out of proportion, and there's all of these quote unquote conspiracy reasons why that's the case. And I know I'm not correct most of the time when it comes to this, but my curiosity and my question to Bill is, how do I know what's the truth? And there's so many different sources and so many different reactions to all these different sources. Can you help me understand where I can go to maintain some resemblance of what we would consider truth?
Yeah, great. And Keith, it's a great question. So I'm going to answer that question in the context of you being the leader of an organization, not just, a guy wanting to find truth. So I'll talk about it in the context of leadership, because I think it's a different axis than as an individual. Does that feel right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think the perception is reality. All right, is that there is a perception right now that this is a global brink of a global pandemic. There are people in New York, there are lawyers and doctors, or lawyers and healthcare workers. There's people in nursing homes in Kirkland, Washington, that have really died from that. And so I think there are people that really are scared. So I think as a leader of an organization, while you may think it's overhyped and you may think it is not as big as people think it is, we need to pause for a second and say, okay, is that what everybody thinks, and how do I respond? Back to your point about where do you find truth? I mean, I think the HHS and the WHO, it's been my experience in working with both of those organizations, and particularly and the FDA, they're a little bit slower than everybody else. But HHS, there is a really, really good source of truth at the CDC website in Atlanta that will just tell the truth on exactly where we are. And I feel really, really good about that. But I think as a leader, and I'll just use you as a proxy for the leader of a company that might have the beliefs that you have, be careful, because there are probably some of your team that might think differently, and you don't want to come across as callous and non-caring, but you do want to come across as, that here's how we feel about it. This is what we're doing about it. So the source of truth, specifically CDC, HHS, I think you can get great information there. Kind of tune out the mainstream media, because I think it's a little bit, I agree, it's a little bit overhyped. But I wouldn't blow everything off, because people died, and that's real.
So I think in line with that, I mean, and this could be the first quote I've ever done. So you're hearing this first on Geeks Geezers Googlization. I'm going to quote Lyle Lovett, and the only reason I'm quoting it is because it's in your book, Bill. You can't second guess your audience. So there's a lot of people that are going to be fearful. There's a lot of people that aren't going to have the ability to decipher, to even understand when there's conflicting information or there's ambiguous information, or frankly, the honest truth is no one really knows where this is going. I mean, it's new, whether it was mishandled or not, whether it was handled perfectly, but this was just a new virulent strain and we just can't figure it out. Going back to your truth answer. But employees are concerning. If I own a company, I've got 150 employees, maybe there's moderate interaction, we've canceled travel, but there's still a concern. Because again, some of the concern is just educating your employees of, what about my kids in school? One of the kids is sick. Should I continue to have them there? I heard about this parent that is sick. What should I do? What are some of the things an employer can do to help manage that? I mean, who do they go to? Who do they turn? Who do they bring in, to be able to present that message?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to culture. It goes back to mission and values. What do you really stand for as an organization? What I've seen in my experience of companies that find themselves in crises, that find themselves in these moments, is that people forget about empathy. Okay, and so I think Keith's question is right on. While there is a lot of fog, being empathetic about the confusion, that's where I think companies have been steered because of litigators and lawyers. They've been steered away from empathy. So I think wherever you determine to be your source of truth, I mentioned something a little bit earlier that I use and when I share it with my team and my clients, but I think the overriding issue is saying, I get it. People are scared. Let me try to help them. So I don't know if you're asking specifically what's the source or what's the resource, but I think it starts with being an empathetic leader that says, I get it. Here's what I found, and let me share it and in a real way, as opposed to just adding to the freak out and adding to the paranoia. Being empathetic, but being resolute is a really good posture, even in a crisis, in any crisis, especially this one.
It's amazing. And this is to you, Keith, too. We're back to empathy. I don't know if any show we do, regardless of what we're talking about, whether that word escapes us. And I'm not sure if we
fascinating,
if
isn't
we
it?
If we did this 2 or 3 years ago, or especially 5 or 10 years ago, if we had this show, it would have never been brought up. People talked about it. Oh, that's one of the soft skills. Yeah, but it doesn't work. So I appreciate that, Bill. And just kind of tie this in. When we know that our listeners are empathetic. That's one of the reasons people listen to us. Maybe that's our approach. Maybe that's our message. But one of our guests, and you'll appreciate this, Bill. One of our guests was Erin Michelson. Her company is Summary.ai. And they have the kind profile. It's a free profile. You can go up. Anybody basically who's listening to this can continue to get that. If you go to thekindquiz.com /GGG. So but you go to the Kind Quiz. We had a couple hundred people participate that over in the last few months. And we found that the universal, the most common, it's not universal, but the most common value of our Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization listeners is empathy. So
that's wonderful.
They're looking. Well, that's wonderful, but they're looking for that. I mean, we have people that are coming to us and are listening to because they value that, and then so it also gets to be is from management. Is do they understand that? I mean, it sounds simple, and it's not sympathy, and it's not just simply going is we understand what your problem is. That's not empathy. I mean, that at least it could be, but it's not expressed as empathy. So the messaging's really, really important. But it just surprising. Empathy just seems to be surfacing every week. So, Bill, you have a couple things in your book, and maybe tell me if this is appropriate or not. But you talk about the 4 steps. You have kind of your pyramid. It's on your front cover, but you sort of have like the 4 A's of reputation management. Can you talk to that a little bit and how people can employ that?
Yeah, terrific. And so it came from a crisis. We had just finished a crisis in New York. The female CEO, she and I were sitting together after the crisis, and we said, well, that sucked. Let's never do this again. And I just was struggling as a consultant to kind of explain what I thought we needed to do next to grow their reputation. They were hit. They had a problem, and they got hit by it. It impacted them. And we were articulating a vision of what to do next. I fumbled in that conversation and wasn't really very good. On the airplane flying home on a cocktail napkin, sitting in coach, I actually mapped out these 4 A's, then went back and tested it with her. And so the 4 A's are this notion of awareness, which is self-awareness about the individual, self-awareness about the organization. If we go on a reputation journey, can we really, really pull it off? Can we talk the talk and walk the walk? That's all in awareness. Assessment is ask the public, as Seth Godin suggests, ask the public what they expect of you. And that could be your employees are a public, stakeholder, your customers are a public, regulators, whoever you define to be your public or the people that matter most to you. It's an assessment, is just ask. There's no magic in reputation management. The public will tell you what their expectations are if we ask them the right questions in the right way. The next A is authority. And authority is about we're self-aware. We think we want to go on this journey. We've talked to our key stakeholders, the folks that matter most. They've told us what they expect. Can we actually deliver on this? And that's where you get buy-in from your senior leadership team, from your board of directors, whatever the case may be. That's where authority comes in, is that, okay, we know what we know about ourselves, about our community, and now we're ready to act. But are you ready to go with me, board of directors, leadership team, general counsel, what have you? There's intentionally a blue line. There's a hard blue line. You'll see it on the cover. Then you move to action, because it is the sin of consultants that say immediately jump to action, or well-intentioned marketers or communicators that immediately jump to action and say, we need to go write a bigger check to the United Way. We need to jump on board LGBTQ issues, or we need to support, U2 Bono's Red campaign. And they just jump to action. People see through that greenwashing. They see through that silliness. So action is protected by this solid blue line, because you have to have gone through those 3 steps. Now, there's a lot more behind it, but that's sort of the basic model to actually really enhance and grow a reputation, understanding what Seth Godin and others are talking about.
Oops, sorry. So where do we go next? I guess where do you? Not asking you because you have no way to predict where the healthcare, where this evolves. But what's next for some of these companies? Who? I think you talked about it before. Is there some service companies or some industrial companies you thought were going to be most affected? But what do you think? Where do you think we're evolving to or going to?
Yeah. So I'm not going to predict the epidemiological trajectory of coronavirus.
I would never.
You don't want to do that on the
you with
Geeks
that.
Geezers and Googlization show?
I think West Virginia's next, so get ready. So I don't know what's next. But here's what I do from my vantage point of what I'm focused on and what we're doing next. And we hit on it earlier. It's relatively straightforward, difficult, but still straightforward for companies to get into coronavirus is to say, we're going to cancel travel. We're going to follow the herd. We're going to do these following things. Here's what we're saying to our employees. Those are relatively straightforward responses because the public sector and the government and whatnot have sort of paved the way for that and some really leading companies. So it's easy to fall into that slipstream and be in the herd. I think the big challenge for companies is, and Keith mentioned this, is that until further notice, when does that end? When do companies say, okay, it's safe to get back in the water. It's safe to open up our stores in China. It's safe to go to the conference in New York or Chicago in March, April, May, June, September. So I think companies need to figure that out. We're investigating this and we're not crystal clear that the authorities, the CDC and the government, everybody other than the president, I don't think we're going to get a siren that says all clear like you would in a tornado. If you live in Tornado Alley, you typically get an all clear siren. I don't think we're going to get that. So companies are going to have to make decisions based on when it's okay to get back in the water without the crystal clear guidance that they had going in of the government. And so I think figuring that out. So Starbucks is back operational in China now. And so they made a decision in order to get back. But we are just now having facilities in Washington and New York that are starting to shut down. So we're very much in the United States a trailing indicator. So the thing we're working on is what's the flare, what's the signal, what's the sound that we're going to hear to guide companies on when it's okay to get back in the water. And I don't have a great answer just yet.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate that. I think going back to what I suggested before, what you suggested was certainly being honest with everybody, having a meeting. People want answers, but you don't have answers, so you can't make them up. But I think just incidents like just the other day, people, again, just because there's a whole bunch of weddings coming up in our family and things, people are going out trying to buy dresses. And a lot of the dresses for weddings or events are made in China. Mm-hmm. And they don't have stock. So partly somebody can listen to the news and say, I think it's hyped up. And then all of a sudden it starts to affect their supplies. And their supplies could be something as, I don't want to say this is trivial, but in scheme of things, pretty trivial that I can't get, the supply, the inventory of wedding dresses or bridesmaid dresses or evening gowns is limited, to pharmaceuticals. And when it starts to impact people, then it's almost the severity of that is going to increase. The reality of the severity is going to hit home. And I think that's where employers have an opportunity to be, they may not have all the answers, but they could be a resource and, of understanding. And, at least make sure that, they have people like you or, that or reach out to, healthcare leaders to see if they can come in and answer questions that the employees have. Because it's not just how is this going to affect my job? It's how is this going to affect my life and my kids and my neighbors and my parents and everyone else.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical for employers and organizations to figure that out because it's what people want. And it goes back to, Keith's question about truth. I'm supposed to be in New York next week with an expert witness, and the expert said he's not traveling. And so that's my truth, whether I think that's paranoia or not. He's not going. And so everything's now gotten changed for me, and that's not my truth, but that's his truth. So therefore, it's become my truth in that context.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple major events. Fortunately, I don't have, other than I'm driving about 100 miles, but I don't have any travel until the mid-April. And one of the conferences just yesterday asked me, and I don't know if this was planned prior to this. It's a major conference, if it was planned prior to this or whether it's because of this. but they said that they're going to be would I be willing to have the event broadcast virtually? Because they're going to offer a virtual package. And I just wonder if that was an event that is a precaution, that what happens if we can't hold the event? Because there's a couple thousand people that were supposed to attend.
Ira, there was one former colleague of mine, Shannon Grace, posted on LinkedIn. Her company has last minute canceled their conference.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
well, this is a major conference that's coming up in April, and so they're already got plans and work and plans that hopefully we'll see what happens. Hopefully maybe we won't have that siren that says it's all clear, but hopefully they'll things will get a little bit more under control. Hey, we're just about out of time, and we can be having this conversation for a while. Hey, Bill, actually I have your a link that was in your book pulled up right in front of me. It's criticalmomentsbook.com. And it's how people can buy it and get a hold of it, certainly on Amazon. You had mentioned that there's some digital resources, some PDFs that they can download there. So I'd highly recommend that everybody go up there. But other than this, how can people get in touch with you? And please share that.
So real active on LinkedIn. We try to produce content up there on my channel, just Bill Coletti, and you've already linked to that. So that's a great place to learn more. But our corporate website is kith.co. We put a lot of great content there. I'm happy to share emails, and all those contacts are on both of those channels. So happy to respond. Love talking about this, and just love help organizations get it right. So those two are the best channels.
Really appreciate it, and I'd love to get you back. Again, we probably fill our calendar just with people that we've getting them back that we didn't get things to talk about. Because love to be able to talk to you about how companies need to improve their employment branding and their reputation, and because again, minor in comparison to what we're talking about with health, but companies are really struggling with building a good reputation about their what type of employer they are, or changing it if they have a problem. So Bill Coletti has been our guest. Critical Moments is his book. Kith.company is kith.company.co. You can visit him there or check him out on LinkedIn. Bill, appreciate it very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and appreciate you taking the time being here.
Ira, Keith, thank you both very much, and thanks for what you do. You do great work, so keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks. You help us do it. You and a lot of our other guests. So we will definitely be in touch. Keith, final words.
Yeah, I mean, you just said what I was thinking. You and I get to sit back and just have 50 minutes of great conversation. And it's just impressive the level of understanding and awareness the guests that come on the show share with us. And they've worked hard, and they're obvious experts and thought leaders. And, I think Bill helped me come to terms with the idea that in spite of all of the hoopla, the coronavirus is something that's out there that needs to be addressed. And it might not make the most sense to overreact and feel like the worst case scenario can present itself. But, I learned to be patient and to pay attention to the good old fashioned ideas of go easy, go slow, learn, and make good decisions. But
again, you and I work with a lot of small business leaders and large, company, but a lot of small, medium-sized business leaders and managers. And it's like, well, we don't know what to tell our employees, so we're waiting. That's not the appropriate response. Even just admitting that we don't know, but here's some things we have in place, and feel free to ask any questions or concern. So great message today, and which also swings back to our empathy. Maybe we'll change the show to empathy. The correct website, because it was just recently changed for the KIND profile. That's KIND, is KIND Quiz. KINDQUIZ.com/GGG. And it's a free profile, wonderful profile. I'll talk to you about what your values are. I recommend everybody go up and get there. Thanks to Aaron Michelson and Summary.ai for allowing us to do that. And at the end of each quarter, they're going to make a donation on our behalf. And they just made one from, and I might blow the name, but it was Dunia Project, DUIDOUNIA project. And it's an after-school program in New York City and Morocco and one other location. And so based on the response, it's AI-generated response, they gave it to an organization that sort of fit our values, our GGG profile values. So appreciate it. Thanks again for everybody listening to another great show. Great guest, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Don't forget to go to googlizationnation.com to sign up for notifications of upcoming shows, live streams, webinars, whatever else we're going to have going on. And remember to order a copy of my book, Edition 2.0, or Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. You get that at join.googlizationnation.com. We're always interested hearing what's on your mind, so connect with us on LinkedIn or on our website, Geeks Geezers Googlization. Thanks again to Zor.ai and Success Performance Solution for helping us be on the air and for sponsoring the show. So until next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, W4CY.com, or you can listen on any of our podcasts. Don't let the shift hit your plans.